Times best-selling author Karen White is here to share more about her new book that's coming up and why it's been such a personal story for her to write.
Yes, so like I've mentioned before, this book has been a long time coming. So I think my original inspiration came when we moved into our flat in London, into Harley House, which is the setting of the book, not only London, but the actual flat I lived in. And the porter or doorman pointed out to me that the reason why not all of the windows in the flat were this beautiful leaded glass that we had in some parts was because during the Blitz, many of the windows had been damaged, and so they had replaced them with plain glass instead of the more expensive leaded glass. And I remember that was the first time that I really felt a connection to history. I've always loved history. My father was a huge history buff. Always took us, to battlefields and reenactments and things like that. But this was the first time I really felt a personal connection. And I remember lying in my bed at night, sort of picturing who might have occupied that bedroom, that flat, during those years when, during the Blitz, it was 9 months of nearly nightly bombings and air raids. And I don't know how you lived through that, but they carried on. And I was fascinated by that little piece of history that I could physically hold in my hands. So I've never set a book in another country before. This is the first time, but it still has my Southern thing going for it because I pick another character from two of my Southern books. But just to give you an idea, so Harley House was built in 1903 or 1904, and this is an earlier picture of it. But yes, it is still there on Regent's Park, and my flat was on the other side. But this little flat, the ground floor flat here, was Cliff Richard. So he was the guy who did Devil Woman. He was more active in the 60s and 70s. And in the 80s, he did the duets with Olivia Newton-John for that old musical Xanadu that didn't do very well. It was supposed to be sort of the next Grease, which I know every single word to both albums. But I would walk by that flat and I'd be harmonizing, hoping that one day he would discover me and make an album with me. That never happened.
Lots of readers submitted questions about Trad Street.
Oh, yeah.
When you first started writing about Melanie and Jack, did you ever dream that it would become a 7-book series?
Oh, gosh, no. I remember when I first had the idea, I actually presented it as a 3-book, as a trio. And my editor and my agent both were like, we really like this story, but we don't really see your readers really jumping on board because they were very different. I know a lot of readers now have read both the Trad Street series and my standalones and enjoy them both. Basically because they're still very much Karen White books. All of my books are very character driven. They're all set in the South, predominantly with the Southern characters. And I think and they're about families and friendships and relationships. And I think both books appeal to readers of all genres. So when I first submitted it to my editor and agent as a 3-book deal, they were like, let's do 2, and we'll see how it goes. And I knew they were thinking. I accused my editor of doing a pity buy, and she assured me that my publisher did not do pity buys, but still, and because they weren't really sure that people would get on board, they had me write 2 books in 1 year. So I'd have a standalone and a Trad Street so that people who were in love with my standalones wouldn't get upset that I was doing something in between. So that started 4 years of doing 2 books a year, which was really exhausting, but I was younger then, I could handle it. Anyway, so I wrote the first book, The House on Trad Street, and that came out, I cannot believe it, August of 2008, if you can believe it. That was the same year my other book, The Memory of Water, came out in April, I believe. So yeah, 2 books. And both books did really, really well, but it was The House on Trad Street that just really got everybody's attention. So I had already started writing the second book, and I was tidying up loose ends. I was finishing the story of Melanie and Jack, and that's when my editor approached my agent and said, would she be willing to write, I'm trying to think, 2 more at that point, or 3 more? I think it was 3 more. And of course I was like, okay, which meant I had to delete half the book that I'd written because I was tying up loose ends, and you can't tie up loose ends if it's going to be a series. So at that point I thought, okay, a 5-book series, that's pretty cool. I can do that. Maybe it was only 2 more books, because I remember when I wrote the 4th book, Return to Trad Street, I thought, okay, this is it. Let me tidy up everything. But when I typed the end, because that was the 4th book, when I typed the end, I just couldn't say goodbye to the characters. So I put an epilogue in there that hinted at more mysteries in the house, meaning it left myself open to either not write another book, or if my publishing house was interested in more books, I had a jumping off place. And sure enough, they came back, and that time they wanted 3 more books. So that's how it ended up being a 7-book series. But by the time I got to the end of the 6th book, I had to end it in a bad place, because in the penultimate book at the end of a series, you cannot have everybody have a happy ending. It can't happen. So that's 7. I always knew there would be for the last 3 books I knew there would be a 7th book, and that everything would be happy. So that book, it's been turned in. I've just turned in my edits. It will be out this November 2021. So yes, back to 2 books a year. Thank you. But with COVID, I had extra time since I had no other book out last year except for the collaboration. I did have time sort of catch up on my personal life and deal with some things, and have 2 fabulous books that I'm very proud of coming out. So it's called The Attic on Queen Street, and it will be out in November of 2021. So hopefully by then, I should be having a cover reveal soon. I've seen it, but I'm not allowed to share it yet. And I don't have an actual date, but stay tuned to my social media, Facebook, Instagram, to get an update of when that's going to be. And of course, you want to follow me on Facebook and Instagram, because I do a lot of cute things with my dogs, because I have 2 very cute dogs. So.
For sure. So I think I know the answer to this question, and I think it ties in nicely with talking about Trad Street, but what is your favorite low country town in South Carolina?
Oh, you know what? That's easy. Edisto.
Oh, it's not Charleston.
No, I mean, I love Charleston. Believe me, I want to live there. But in terms of where, and I've always had this connection with Charleston. The first time I visited, I felt that I was home, and but in terms of that low country feeling with the marshes and all of that, it's Edisto. I went to Edisto. Do you want to come on? Come on, Sophie. This is my demanding dog, Sophie. We also call her Demanda. I went to Edisto, and I stayed there, and I rented a house to research. I believe in work. It's all about sacrifice. To write The Time Between, which is one of my favorite books, and I think it's because it really hones in on what makes the Low Country special. And what I especially love about Edisto is that it doesn't want to be another Hilton Head. I mean, they just put that bridge in relatively recently. Before, it was like a ferry. It was a pain to get there. The only national chain store that they have there is, it used to be Piggly Wiggly, which is my favorite grocery store on the planet, but they were bought out by Big Lots. So it's the only big grocery store, but everything else there, it is, locally owned businesses. And I love that. You go to the farmer's market and get the fresh produce, and it's just, people rent there. They have rentals. It's not real fancy. But it's just a beautiful location if you really want to experience what the Low Country was like before the rest of the world discovered it.
Sounds amazing. So favorite?
An Edisto bookstore. Awesome independently owned bookstore. definitely check it out when you're there.
Love it, love it. So I know you've been to Charleston a lot.
A lot.
Share with us some of your favorite places to go to when you're there.
Oh boy. Of course I love the Battery. It's a great place to run if you're a runner. I don't like running downtown Charleston because their streets are so uneven, and I'm always looking down because I'm afraid that I'm gonna trip or break something or sprain an ankle. I love the Battery just to see the harbor on a beautiful day. You can see Fort Sumter out in the distance, which is where the first shots of the Civil War were fired. It is such a walkable town. I love walking in the evening because then, if people are kind enough to leave their lights on and not close their drapes, I can look at the decor inside. I know. I don't go. I stay on the sidewalk. I don't go press my nose up against the glass. Okay, but and if you're lucky enough to be there in the spring, just to walk by and see all of the gorgeous flowers from the peek into the gardens and look at the beautiful window boxes. I mean, they are just, Charlestonians really know how to do the whole springtime floral stuff. And you smell, throughout the spring and summer, you just smell all those fragrances of the flowers. And there's one, I can never remember, I find it accidentally every time I'm in Charleston. I'm doing one of my walks. But there is a house with a gated garden, but they have a cute dog. And there's a sign that says, "Please throw the ball." I guess, it's sort of another demanda. The dog loves to play fetch. So they'll put the little, the ball there, and then, people will just reach in and throw it, and the dog will get it and bring it back to you. So I can't remember. It's probably a Boykin Spaniel, from what I remember. Because, again, I don't find him every time I'm there. But it's the sweetest thing. But that's what I love about Charleston. I love, King Street, the shopping, the restaurants on East Bay. Oh my gosh. And of course, Charleston Place is one of my favorite places to stay. But also, I've been to the boutique hotel, the George Street, I think. It's a bed and breakfast, and it is phenomenal. And their restaurant is amazing. Restaurant week there is pretty exciting. And of course, going to all the Nathaniel Russell House, any of the house museums are must-sees. And all of this stuff you don't need to do with a car. This is all walking. Of course, I'm a huge walker. So I'll probably say it's walking distance, and a lot of you are like, what? But anything's walking distance for me because I lived in London and we didn't own a car, so I'm used to walking. But,
I know there are some amazing bookstores.
Yes, there are two. So there's Buxton Bookstore, which is on Lower King, closer to Broad Street. And then there is Blue Bicycle Books, which is on Upper King on the other side. I hope I'm getting upper and lower. I'm pretty sure I am. Both phenomenal independent bookstores that I love to visit when I'm there. And my favorite store, which is also Melanie's favorite store on King Street, the Finicky Philly. I love their stuff. Just great. And the people who own it, the owner and her daughter, and the other people who work there, and they have a store dog too, are just amazing. Just the kind of friendly Southern hospitality that you expect.
Well, and isn't there donuts?
Oh, please. I have to stay away from it. Oh my goodness. It's on King Street. It's on Upper King. And it's in the last two or three books because they're gourmet donuts. I think it's something gourmet donuts or just gourmet donuts. Oh my goodness. Somebody has to write in the comments below. Because I try to avoid it because I love donuts. Unlike Melanie, I adore donuts. But unlike Melanie, I can't eat them as many as she does because, she has metabolism. Mine, it's not as good as it used to be. So, and I'm like Pac-Man. If I start with a bite of donut, that's it. Nobody's safe.